When a pregnant wife mysteriously disappears, her billionaire husband tries to steal her fortune and marry his mistress. Elizabeth Harrington never suspected her blossoming life would one day spiral into a harrowing nightmare. Married to the charismatic millionaire Richard Harrington and pregnant with her first child, she basked in the glow of high society galas and lavish weekends at their palatial Connecticut estate. Yet, beneath the glittering surface, jealousy and greed festered in her husband's heart. When Elizabeth vanishes without a trace, a tangled web of deceit rapidly unfurls, revealing Richard's schemes to seize her vast inheritance and wed his cunning mistress instead. What truly happened to Elizabeth? And can her real friends and allies untangle the mystery before Richard's ruthless plot succeeds? Elizabeth Caldwell grew up in a small but loving family in upstate New York. Though her parents were far from wealthy, they instilled in her the values of compassion, humility, and perseverance. After earning a scholarship to a prestigious university, Elizabeth found success working as a design consultant for upscale residences, eventually garnering accolades in prominent architectural magazines. Her eye for subtle elegance and the fortune she inherited from a late aunt in London brought her into the orbit of the elite. It was an exclusive Manhattan charity function that she first met Richard Harrington, a self-made millionaire whose technology ventures soared in the cutthroat business world. Their connection was immediate. Elizabeth's soft-spoken grace balanced Richard's confident charm. People whispered it was a match made in heaven when Richard proposed to her during a luxurious getaway in Paris. Elizabeth accepted, her heart bursting with excitement for a future she believed would be filled with both love and purpose. Following their wedding, the couple settled into a sprawling property in Greenwich, Connecticut, a place of rolling lawns, ornate fountains, and stately columns. Elizabeth's personal fortune, inherited from her aunt's successful media ventures in England, remained under her name, though her new husband often joked about pooling resources. Despite these occasional hints, Elizabeth trusted him implicitly. She believed that trust was the bedrock of marriage. Soon, she discovered she was pregnant. Richard reacted with jubilant pride, throwing a grand celebration among their circle of wealthy friends. Elizabeth glowed with happiness. She pictured the child growing up in a comfortable, loving environment, with both parents doting on every step. But even as she prepared a pastel-themed nursery and beamed over sonograms, subtle rifts appeared. Richard's business phone calls became more secretive, his nights out more frequent. Elizabeth noticed his once affectionate gestures replaced by gruff impatience. She told herself it was just work stress, that the new technology deals weighed on him. She had no inkling that behind her husband's megawatt smile and philanthropic facade lay brewing malice. Had she known the shadows lurking in Richard's mind, his hunger for her inheritance, the secret text to a woman named Juliana Beaumont, excitement for motherhood might have been tainted by fear. Yet at this juncture, Elizabeth only saw the idyllic life unfolding before her eyes, unaware of the cataclysm that awaited. At 6 months pregnant, Elizabeth moved with buoyant steps through the corridors of the Harrington mansion. She spent her days working with an interior designer to finalize the nursery. Pale yellow walls, soft lavender curtains, and plush carpets to cushion little feet. Whenever she imagined holding her baby, a gentle warmth swelled in her chest. But beneath this joyous routine, Elizabeth caught odd whispers in social circles, references to Richard's frequent late-night excursions and mention of him being seen at upscale bars with a stylish brunette. She tried to dismiss these stories as idle gossip. Greenwich society was rife with rumors, often baseless, about its wealthiest families. Still, a seed of unease took root. One afternoon, Elizabeth's friend Victoria Dawson visited over tea served by the household staff. Victoria hesitated before speaking. "Liz, I heard your husband was spotted last week at a charity event, arriving with someone who wasn't you." She frowned, flipping a lock of chestnut hair behind her shoulder. "I'm sure it's nonsense, but I wanted to let you know." Elizabeth's heart thudded. "Oh, that must have been a business associate. I'm sure there's an explanation," she replied softly, forcing a smile. Yet later that evening, she questioned Richard about it. He waved it off with a laugh, claiming it was a minor investor named Juliana Beaumont who needed guidance on philanthropic initiatives. "I'm only helping her set up a non-profit," he added, giving Elizabeth a swift kiss on the forehead. His casual dismissal should have soothed her, yet Elizabeth found it strangely hollow. In the days that followed, she noticed more subtle changes. Richard's phone calls ended abruptly when she entered her room. He grew dismissive of her inquiries about finances or future investments. He even made snide remarks about how her pregnancy cravings, like midnight gelato, cost a small fortune. Elizabeth tried to remain positive. She confided in her longtime confidant, Cassandra Blake, who had known her from design school. Cassandra's immediate reaction was concern. "Trust your instincts," Cassandra warned. "If something doesn't feel right, it probably isn't." Although Elizabeth valued her friend's words, she clung to the hope that it was all a misunderstanding. As she drifted off to sleep each night, Elizabeth reassured herself that Richard loved her, that soon they would welcome a baby into a strong marriage. She couldn't imagine that her husband's heart was already set on a darker plan, one that soon threatened to unravel her world completely. Over the next few weeks, Elizabeth sensed a mounting tension at home. Richard's once loving gesturisa warm goodnight peck or an occasional surprise bouquet faded entirely. He grew terse, offering clipped responses whenever she probed about his day. Sometimes, Elizabeth would catch him pacing their luxurious balcony, murmuring on the phone with someone. If she asked, he'd snap, "It's business," in a voice that brooked no follow-up questions. She consoled herself with preparations for the baby, determined to maintain some semblance of joy. One morning, a surprise phone call from a British law firm deepened her anxieties. They represented her late aunt's estate and wanted to confirm certain details about Elizabeth's inheritance. Supposedly, they had received inquiries from someone on her behalf about structuring the assets differently. Elizabeth's brow furrowed. She had not authorized any changes and certainly had not asked anyone to do so. The lawyer, Malcolm Rawling, promised to forward the relevant documents. That evening, Elizabeth confronted Richard about it, albeit gently, careful not to trigger his temper. "I received a strange call from Anne Elaine's estate lawyer. They said someone requested changes to my inheritance. Did you speak to them?" Richard's jaw tensed. "I might have asked a few questions about the best way to protect your assets," he replied hastily. "After all, we're soon to be a bigger family with a child on the way. Doesn't it make sense for me to help manage things so we have them in a single trust?" Elizabeth frowned. "But I didn't ask for that. And why not discuss it with me first?" He forced a short laugh. "God, Elizabeth, do I need your permission to handle financial stability for our family? Fine, I'll back off." He practically stormed out, leaving her to stare at his retreating figure, with disquiet swirling in her mind. Later that night, she sought solace from Victoria Dawson via a lengthy phone call, voicing her concerns. Victoria listened intently, softly suggesting that maybe Richard was feeling overshadowed by her inheritance. "Men with big egos can be sensitive about money," Victoria offered. "Be cautious, Liz. Don't sign anything without checking thoroughly." Elizabeth had no intention of relinquishing control of her inheritance. She was proud of having her own resources, yet a flicker of doubt whispered, how far might Richard go to seize that independence from her? Unbeknownst to Elizabeth, the seeds of Richard's duplicity had already blossomed into a full-blown scheme, one that involved forging signatures, manipulating attorneys, and ensuring that if Elizabeth disappeared, he'd seize the fortune she once believed was safely hers. A couple of days later, an unexpected ally provided Elizabeth with the first solid hint of Richard's potential affair. Michael Donovan, a discreet private investigator who sometimes worked for the Harrington family on security matters, contacted her. He had overheard rumors that Richard was seen numerous times with a certain Miss Beaumont. Michael, having long admired Elizabeth's kindness, felt compelled to quietly warn her. Richard insisted she was an investor, she told Michael over a hushed phone call. "But you're suggesting it's more than that." Michael paused. "I can't confirm the extent, Mrs. Harrington, but the frequency and context of their meetings at exclusive hotels and private clubs is suspicious. Elizabeth thanked him, heart pounding, as she realized that the woman from the gossip might be Juliana Beaumont. After the call, Elizabeth rummaged through a desk in the study, searching for any mention of this person. Her heart jolted when she found an expense list for a lavish suite at a 5-star downtown hotel, apparently billed to Harrington's business account. The occupant's name was J. Beaumont, with a check-in date that coincided with one of Richard's supposed overnight business trips. Determined for answers, Elizabeth confronted Richard that evening. She showed him the expense record. He blanched momentarily, then his face hardened. "So, you've been snooping through my documents now," he said icily. "Juliana was in town for a business pitch, and I offered to help. End of story. Why blow it out of proportion? God, you're so paranoid." At any other time in their marriage, Elizabeth might have doubted her suspicions, trusting him wholeheartedly. But now, her instinct screamed that he was lying. The tension erupted into a rare shouting match, culminating in Richard storming off to spend the night in the guest room, leaving Elizabeth sobbing in bed. Her unborn child kicked as if sensing her distress. She cradled her belly, tears dampening the pillow, wondering how the man she loved could treat her so callously. Her trust fractured further. She recalled Michael Donovan's warning, the suspicious financial meddling, the swirl of society gossip. Each piece fit together to paint an unsettling picture. Richard Harrington had a mistress, and he seemed desperate to access Elizabeth's inheritance by any means necessary. If only Elizabeth had known that discovering the affair was merely the beginning. A far more sinister plan was in motion, one that placed her very life in jeopardy. It happened on a crisp autumn morning when the leaves had just begun to turn golden around the Harrington estate. Elizabeth vanished without a trace. The household staff noted her bed was unslept. There were no breakfast requests, no sound of her footsteps. She was normally an early riser. She was nowhere to be found. Panicked, her personal assistant, Fiona Mills, tried calling Elizabeth's cell phone. It went straight to voicemail. Fiona alerted Richard, who feigned ignorance. She was upset last night and didn't come to dinner. Perhaps she needed space, he suggested with a dismissive wave of his hand. Have the staff check the gardens or near the stables. Yet hours passed with no sign of Elizabeth. The staff combed the estate grounds thoroughly. There were no clues, no personal belongings left behind. Her wallet was in her private study, but her phone was missing from its charger. By midday, the sense of alarm intensified. Fiona pressed Richard to notify the authorities. At first, he seemed hesitant, but eventually, under pressure, he called the local police to report his wife missing. Detectives arrived, led by Detective Carmen Alvarez, a composed and sharp-minded investigator. She questioned the staff. She questioned Richard. "Mr. Harrington," she said, eyeing him steadily, "your wife is pregnant, correct? It's unusual for a pregnant woman to disappear on her own." Richard rubbed his temples dramatically. "We had an argument last night. She was emotional. I worry she may have run off in frustration, but please, find her. This is so unlike her." His voice quivered with what seemed like genuine distress, although Detective Alvarez's penetrating gaze lingered longer than he might have liked. Behind the scenes, the staff whispered their suspicions. Fiona confided in Victoria Dawson about Richard's strangely calm demeanor. Meanwhile, Michael Donovan, the private investigator, heard the news and felt a gnawing sensation that something was terribly wrong. Elizabeth might have left temporarily in tears, but she wouldn't simply vanish without contacting her best friends or ensuring her unborn child's well-being. As the sun dipped low, painting the sky with purples and oranges, the Harrington mansion stood in tense vigil. Patrol cars roamed the surroundings. Drones scanned the wooded areas. Still, there was no sign of Elizabeth. A foreboding hush settled over the grand halls that once echoed with her gentle laughter. If she truly was taken or had fled for her life, who held the secrets to her disappearance? Could it be a random kidnapping? Or was it connected to her inheritance and her unfaithful husband? That night, alone in the master bedroom, Richard stared at his reflection in a gilded mirror, a flicker of satisfaction mingling with a hint of anxiety. He had taken a bold step forward in his scheme, but if he wanted Elizabeth's inheritance, he needed to ensure no one would ever suspect him. The plan had begun, and there was no turning back. In the days following Elizabeth's disappearance, the police investigation escalated. News of the pregnant Mrs. Harrington's vanishing act spread quickly through media outlets, fueling public concern and the tabloids' appetite for scandal. Interviews with the Harrington staff revealed no immediate leads. They all described Elizabeth as gentle, well-liked, and thrilled for her baby's arrival, someone with no reason to vanish willingly. Detective Carmen Alvarez questioned Richard extensively, noting his contradictory statements. "You mentioned an argument the night she disappeared," she reminded him during a second interview in the mansion's drawing room. "But your staff said everything seemed normal at dinner. Why did no one hear you or Elizabeth fighting?" He forced a wry smile. "We argued privately in her dressing room. I asked them not to disturb us. We parted ways in anger. That's all I can say. She probably left early in the morning." His answers sounded rehearsed. The detective's suspicion deepened when she learned from Elizabeth's friend, Victoria Dawson, that the missing woman would never vanish without calling. Elizabeth's unborn child meant the world to her. Moreover, a background check revealed Richard's precarious finances. Risky investments had cost him heavily, while Elizabeth's fortune remained stable. It wasn't definitive evidence, but it painted a worrying picture. Meanwhile, in a surprising twist, Michael Donovan discovered something in Elizabeth's private study, a small hidden compartment in a wooden desk containing copies of suspicious documents. One was a bank transaction Richard made to a certain J. Beaumont, mistress, for a large sum. Another was a letter from Elizabeth's British lawyer confirming her refusal to alter the inheritance trust. The final, incomplete note, dated days before her disappearance, read, "I fear Richard wants to control my assets. Something is wrong." Donovan discreetly shared these findings with Detective Alvarez, who sealed them as potential evidence. "This is big," she acknowledged, brows furrowing. If she suspected her husband's intentions, could she have run away for her own safety? Or did he stage something more sinister? But in the swirl of speculation, no tangible proof emerged of Elizabeth's fate. The local police continued searching the estate grounds, scouring the lake and nearby forest. They set up a hotline requesting tips from the public. Journalists camped outside the gates, snapping photos of a haggard Richard, who proclaimed his grief for his missing wife. Behind closed doors, though, Richard harbored quiet confidence that the steps he'd taken to orchestrate Elizabeth's disappearance would hold up. Yet, seeds of doubt sprouted. Would the mistress keep her silence? Could the evidence Elizabeth left behind unravel his carefully laid plan? Across town, in a modern penthouse suite with sweeping city views, Juliana Beaumont lounged restlessly. She had once enjoyed the thrill of her affair with Richard Harrington, lavish gifts, exclusive events, and the tantalizing prospect of wealth beyond measure. But in the wake of Elizabeth's disappearance, tension shrouded her every move. Something about the entire situation felt too large, too dangerous. One evening, Richard visited Juliana's penthouse after evading the paparazzi. Anxiety rolled off him, though he tried to maintain an air of poise. "The police are hounding me," he grumbled, pacing near the floor-to-ceiling windows. "That Detective Alvarez is suspicious. My phone won't stop ringing." Juliana sipped a glass of wine, crossing her long legs. "I never signed on for a missing person fiasco. If you orchestrated something extreme." He spun around, his face taut. "What do you mean if I orchestrated it?" She left on her own. Everyone knows she was emotional. She shot him a skeptical glare. "Sure, but people are saying it's strange. Elizabeth vanished with no note, no phone call, especially since she's pregnant. Your entire plan to inherit her assets could bring us both down if the cops prove anything." Richard's eyes flickered. "We just need to keep calm. She's gone. The estate will eventually declare her absent or dead, and the trust will revert to me as her spouse. Then we can move forward, get married, combine everything." Juliana's lips pressed into a thin line. And how long until that happens? I'm not waiting in secret for months or years. I have my own ambitions. If you think I'll quietly remain your mistress while you juggle a police investigation, think again. A muscle twitched in Richard's jaw. So you want out? She shrugged with feigned indifference, swirling the wine in her glass. Not necessarily, but I want guarantees. If I stand by you, I expect to share the spoils once the Harrington fortune is ours. He stepped closer, a forced smile twisting his lips. Of course, my love. Once I have legal claim to her fortune, I can settle any amount you wish. But we must keep up appearances. I can't let them suspect you. A flicker of greed softened Juliana's anger. I'll remain discreet, but make no mistake, if trouble arises, I won't go down with you. Ensure you finalize this swiftly. They clinked glasses in a toast that felt more like a vow of complicity. Yet, hidden beneath her seductive veneer, Juliana's mind churned. Richard was cunning, but also desperate. She needed to be certain she didn't become collateral if his plan unraveled. For now, she'd play along, though the lines between lover, accomplice, and potential traitor grew ever more tangled. Days turned into a week with no sign of Elizabeth. Detective Alvarez grew increasingly convinced that foul play was involved, though she lacked a smoking gun. The Harrington mansion brimmed with tension. Reporters staked out the gates, while socialites whispered theories about Elizabeth's disappearance. Some speculated she ran away from an unhappy marriage, while others voiced suspicion that Richard might be responsible. In this tense climate, Victoria Dawson decided to take matters in her own hands. She had known Elizabeth for years and felt certain her friend would never abandon her child. Armed with intuition and a fierce loyalty, Victoria contacted Michael Donovan to propose a collaboration. We both care about Liz, she reasoned. The police are limited by protocol, but we can dig deeper. Michael, impressed by Victoria's resolve, agreed. I've already uncovered financial irregularities. Let's see what else we can learn. They decided to investigate quietly, not wanting to alert Richard or sabotage the official police investigation. Their first step was revisiting Elizabeth's circle people who might have witnessed suspicious interactions or overheard telling remarks. They interviewed Cassandra Blake, Elizabeth's design school confidant, who recounted Elizabeth's mounting concerns about Richard's demands regarding her inheritance. Liz said she felt cornered, Cassandra revealed. Richard wanted her fortune locked into a joint trust. She refused. They visited Elizabeth's personal assistant, Fiona Mills, who disclosed discovering Elizabeth's daily plan of the day after she vanished. It was weird, Fiona said, flipping through the pages. On the day she disappeared, Elizabeth wrote, "Meet with Emery. Suspicious doc 9 a.m., but no one at the house is named M. Possibly Michael Donovan," Victoria mused, but he never came that morning. This clue piqued Michael's interest. He hadn't scheduled a meeting with Elizabeth. Could the M stand for someone else? A lawyer, perhaps? Another friend? The note seemed incomplete. If Elizabeth planned to confront someone about a suspicious document, maybe she discovered a direct threat from Richard or a co-conspirator. Buoyed by this lead, Victoria and Michael pressed on. They concluded that if Elizabeth left on her own, she might have done so under duress. Yet the tidy bedroom, her missing phone, and her half-finished nursery design told a different story. She would never willingly vanish from her unborn baby's life. Driven by unwavering loyalty, they made a vow. "We won't let the truth remain buried," Victoria told Michael. No matter how powerful Richard Harrington is. Little did they know, their quest for answers would soon propel them into greater danger and reveal just how far Richard would go to secure the Harrington fortune. Late that evening, the Harrington estate fell into an uneasy hush. The moon hung low over the manicured grounds, its pale glow revealing winding pathways and meticulously trimmed hedges. Under other circumstances, the scene might have evoked tranquility, but tonight it only heightened the tension simmering in the air. Determined to find tangible proof of Elizabeth's suspicions, Victoria Dawson and Michael Donovan gathered near a side entrance used mostly by the household staff. A single lamp flickered above the doorway, casting wavering shadows across the stone walkway. The two exchanged a nervous glance, hearts pounding at the enormity of what they were about to do. Officially, the police had combed the mansion and questioned staff multiple times, but Victoria and Michael felt certain that crucial evidence might remain undiscovered, especially if Richard Harrington had hidden it well. They wore dark, nondescript clothing. Michael had chosen a black jacket and matching trousers, while Victoria opted for a charcoal hoodie and rubber-soled shoes to minimize noise on the polished floors. Neither had experience in covert operations, yet their concern for Elizabeth fueled their courage. As Michael quietly picked the simple lock on the side door, he whispered, "Keep your flashlight beam low. We don't want to alert any security or staff still awake." Victoria nodded, gripping a slim flashlight with trembling fingers. She recalled her last conversation with Elizabeth, how her friend's voice had held a note of dread over Richard's shifting demeanor. And now Elizabeth was gone, pregnant and possibly in grave danger. That urgency propelled Victoria forward, even as 1,000 worst-case scenarios played in her head. Once inside, they slipped along the dimly lit corridors. The mansion's grandeur felt oppressive in an endless expanse of marble floors, ornate columns, and looming portraits of Harrington ancestors. Moonlight streaming through tall windows created restless patches of illumination that danced whenever a breeze swayed the curtains. Each time the house creaked, Victoria's pulse skittered, terrified it was Richard himself emerging from the shadows. Their destination was Elizabeth's private study, a small but elegantly furnished room where she conducted personal business separate from her husband's dealings. They had learned from the staff that Elizabeth often locked away important documents in her antique writing desk. The police had inspected the area, but Victoria suspected Elizabeth might have concealed vital information more cleverly than a routine search would reveal. Creeping inside the study, they paused to let their eyes adjust to the dark. A faint floral fragrance still lingered, a reminder of Elizabeth's penchant for scented candles and fresh blooms. The space was tidy, aside from a few stacked books on interior design. Michael gestured for Victoria to stand watch while he began opening drawers in the writing desk, his soft footfalls echoing. "Police found some documents here, but nothing conclusive," he murmured. "I wonder if there's a hidden compartment." He pressed lightly along the inside edges of the desk, searching for seams or loose panels. Victoria, meanwhile, skimmed the shelves, flicking her small flashlight across row upon row of titles on architecture and design. Then, tucked behind a decorative vase, she noticed a time-worn notebook partially concealed, its leather cover scuffed from handling. Her breath caught. Could this be significant? With great care, she extracted the notebook. It appeared to be a diary, the pages lined with a neat, flowing script, unmistakably Elizabeth's. Victoria's heartbeat quickened as she recognized the date entries from the last few months, days leading up to Elizabeth's disappearance. She opened it carefully, scanning lines that described a mounting sense of dread. "Richard is pushing me about the trust again. I keep refusing. Something is terribly off." The entries revealed that Elizabeth suspected her husband might forge legal documents to gain control of her fortune. She mentioned overhearing him on private phone calls with that woman, presumably Juliana Beaumont. The last entry was especially chilling. "If anything happens to me, I'm certain Richard is behind it. I need to alert someone, but I lack concrete proof." A cold shiver coursed through Victoria. "This is it," she whispered, her eyes brimming with equal parts relief and horror. She wrote everything down: her suspicions, her fear. This proved she knew Richard was plotting something. Michael rushed over, scanning the diary pages by flashlight. "We have to get this to Detective Alvarez immediately," he said, his voice taut with urgency. He carefully placed the diary inside a protective folder he'd brought along, intending to preserve any fingerprints or additional evidence. Suddenly, the unmistakable click of a light switch reverberated from the hallway, flooding part of the corridor with brightness. Victoria's breath stalled. Someone was awake, patrolling the corridors, or perhaps returning from outside. They heard muted footsteps followed by the low rumble of a voice, Richard's voice, heavy with irritation. Michael doused the flashlight. The two pressed themselves against the wall, hearts drumming. Through a small gap in the study's partially open door, they glimpsed Richard pacing. He was holding his phone to his ear, speaking in a tense, hushed tone. "Just keep quiet," they heard him say. "Nobody's found her. The cops have nothing but speculation. We're almost in the clear." Victoria felt sick. Her worst fears were confirmed. Richard knew exactly where Elizabeth Wazer, what had happened to her, and was brazenly confident in his plan. Michael clenched his fists, silently motioning for them to remain hidden. They waited, barely breathing, as Richard continued his conversation. "All that matters is the trust eventually reverts to me," Richard muttered. "I'll handle any doubts. The police can't prove a damn thing. Just don't contact me again until we finalize everything." A moment later, the light clicked off, and Richard's footsteps receded back down the corridor. Darkness reclaimed the study. Michael and Victoria stayed rooted in place for another agonizing minute until they were certain he was gone. Finally, they slipped out, creeping along the house's perimeter halls until they reached the side exit. Once outside, they gulped in the cool night air. Despite their relief at not being discovered, a deep chill lingered. Richard's conversation hinted that Elizabeth was alive, but hidden or worse. They had to act fast. Clutching the diary to her chest, Victoria whispered, "We can't let him get away with this." Michael nodded grimly, leading her across the lawn toward their parked car. "Let's hope Detective Alvarez can use this journal as a cornerstone to bring him down. We'll push for a deeper investigation into his finances, his phone records, whatever it takes." As they drove off into the night, a mixture of triumph and dread filled them. They had uncovered Elizabeth's warnings, a dangerous discovery that could very well topple Richard's elaborate ruse. Yet with each passing hour, Elizabeth's life and the fate of her unborn child hung precariously in the balance. Neither Victoria nor Michael could rest until they unraveled every last thread of Richard Harrington's sinister plan. While the Harrington estate buzzed with police scrutiny and hushed rumors, Elizabeth woke to an unfamiliar ceiling. Her head pounded, her body felt heavy, and confusion swirled in her mind. As her vision cleared, she realized she lay on a simple bed in a small, sparsely furnished room, a far cry from the opulence of her home. Pushing aside the thin blanket, she tried to stand. She wobbled, noticing a dull ache at the back of her neck. The last thing she recalled was confronting Richard about forging certain inheritance documents. Then, darkness. Had she been drugged? A door creaked open. In stepped Thomas Garcia, a tall, broad-shouldered man with a stoic expression. He offered a tray of food, setting it on a table. She stared at him, alarmed. "Where am I? What's happening?" He avoided her gaze. "You're safe. For now. I'm under instructions to keep you here." Elizabeth's heart hammered. Under whose instructions? Richard's? Thomas's silence said enough. Fear stabbed her chest. She placed a protective hand over her belly, tears stinging her eyes. "He can't do this. I am pregnant. Please, I need to see a doctor." Thomas hesitated. "He said you'd have medical care if necessary. Until then, I can't let you leave. Don't make this harder. The man's paying me a fortune." Elizabeth sank onto the bed, horror rising. She was effectively a prisoner, but she sensed that Thomas wasn't entirely comfortable with the arrangement. "You're locking me here to help him steal my inheritance. That's monstrous." Her voice trembled. "I could be your sister, your daughter. Have you no conscience?" His jaw tightened. For a moment, sympathy flickered in his eyes, but he brushed it aside. "I do what I'm paid to do." He stepped out, leaving her alone once more. As the door locked behind him, Elizabeth forced herself to remain calm. Anxiety threatened to overwhelm her, but she clung to hope. She needed to escape, or at least get word to someone. Her baby's safety depended on it. Examining the room, she found no obvious phone, no open window. It seemed this was a rural or remote property, a safe house or hideaway that Richard had arranged. Summoning her courage, Elizabeth vowed not to surrender. If she could outsmart Thomas or find a weakness in this captivity, she might break free. In her darkest moment, she conjured the image of her child, fueling a desperate determination to survive Richard's twisted plan. Early the next morning, Michael Donovan and Victoria Dawson met Detective Carmen Alvarez at the police station. Nervous energy crackled between them as they handed over Elizabeth's diary. Detective Alvarez flipped through its pages, her brow knitting deeper with each entry. The personal account painted a stark portrait of a woman who feared her husband's ulterior motives. One passage particularly grabbed Alvarez's attention. He wants to revise my inheritance trust. I suspect forgery. If I vanish, he's to blame. She let out a slow exhale. This is substantial evidence that Elizabeth anticipated danger from Richard, she murmured. Victoria fidetel anxiously. We also overheard him on the phone last night, talking about how no one can prove anything. He basically admitted to a plan to gain control of her assets. Alvarez nodded gravely. That's enough for me to step up the investigation and get a warrant, but we still lack direct evidence linking him to a crime. If Elizabeth's truly alive, we need a lead on her whereabouts. Michael leaned forward, his voice tense. Given the finances at play, I suspect he might have stashed her somewhere. This is not a typical missing person case. He suggested the possibility that Richard hired a henchman, someone like Thomas Garcia, whose name had floated around local circles as a fixer for shady dealings. Armed with this new insight, Detective Alvarez assembled a specialized unit, requesting a court order to search Richard's phone records, financial statements, and any property he might own outside the city. She also planned to question Juliana Beaumont more rigorously, suspecting the mistress might know crucial details. That afternoon, a search team arrived at the Harrington mansion with a warrant, surprising Richard mid-video conference. Furious, he barked that he was being harassed. I have the best lawyers in the state. You can't just storm in, he hissed at Alvarez. She presented the judge's signed order. We have legitimate cause, Mr. Harrington, she replied coolly. As for Juliana, Alvarez summoned her for questioning at the station. Juliana arrived with an expensive lawyer, maintaining her innocence and deflecting all inquiries about Elizabeth. I only know her from society events, Juliana lied sweetly. This entire matter is tragic. Behind the scenes, the police discovered suspicious financial transfers from Richard's company account to an offshore entity. They also found recent calls to a known associate of Thomas Garcia. While not conclusive proof, these breadcrumbs sketched a damning pattern. Now the stakes were higher than ever. If Elizabeth was truly alive but hidden away, time was of the essence. Detective Alvarez, Victoria, and Michael Donovan channeled every resource to find the missing pregnant woman, hoping to rescue her from a fate orchestrated by the very man sworn to love and protect her. In the modest cottage that served as her prison, Elizabeth endured long hours of solitude. Thomas brought simple meals and occasionally allowed her short walks in a small, fenced yard, always under his watchful eyes. She tried appealing to his conscience, reminding him she needed prenatal care, but each time he grunted vague reassurances or ignored her pleas. Despite her dire circumstances, Elizabeth remained determined to gather information. During one of her monitored walks, she surreptitiously noted the surroundings: pine trees, a dirt road, a dilapidated barn in the distance. She committed every detail to memory, hoping to exploit any chance for escape. Sometimes at dusk, faint headlights glimmered beyond the barn, suggesting a nearby highway or rural road. If only she could slip away. Her thoughts whirled with questions. Had the police concluded she fled on her own? Did her friends suspect foul play? She clung to her faith in Victoria Dawson and Michael Donovan, convinced they wouldn't rest until the truth surfaced. One afternoon, a new face appeared: Paula Maxwell, a nurse hired by Richard, so she claimed. Paula checked Elizabeth's vitals, performed a rudimentary exam of the pregnancy, then reported back on her phone. Yes, mother and baby are stable. She's around 28 weeks. No major complications. She needs more vitamins, Paula said in a hushed voice, scribbling notes. Elizabeth seized the moment, whispering, "Help me. He kidnapped me." But Paula gave her a pained look, pressing a finger to her lips. "I can't," was all she said, collecting her bag. Elizabeth's hope deflated. Even a nurse was complicit or coerced. That evening, as Elizabeth lay restless, she remembered the day she learned she was pregnant. Richard had seemed overjoyed, spinning her around in celebration. How had it deteriorated into this vile betrayal? She fought back tears, reminding herself to be strong for her unborn child. She needed a plan, and swiftly. Meanwhile, miles away, Juliana Beaumont confronted Richard in her penthouse again, anger flaring. You said this would be quicker, staged disappearance. Now the cops are tearing into your finances, and I risk being implicated. You're losing control, Richard. He tried to calm her, promising the situation was nearly resolved. Once the lawyers declare Elizabeth absent, I'll claim the inheritance. Then we can vanish. Be patient. But as the net tightened from the outside and Elizabeth's determination grew within her captivity, the stage was set for a final collision, one that would lay bare the darkest corners of Richard Harrington's soul. Detective Alvarez's investigative team uncovered a property deed in Richard's Namia remote cabin on the outskirts of a rural county. Although purchased under a shell corporation, the trail eventually pointed back to him. This discovery, combined with phone records showing repeated calls to Thomas Garcia, ignited hope for finding Elizabeth. Victoria Dawson and Michael Donovan insisted on assisting the police. Liz might be there, Victoria urged. We have to act fast. She's in her third trimester. Her health could be at risk. Alvarez agreed. She assembled a SWAT contingent for a surprise search of the property. We can't tip him off, she cautioned. If he suspects we know, he could move her or worse. Let's move at dawn. As dawn's first light crept over a quiet forest, unmarked police vehicles rolled down a dirt path. Their headlights cut through the mist toward an unassuming cabin tucked among towering pines. Heart thudding, Victoria rode with Michael in a separate car, staying back as the SWAT team advanced. They watched in intense silence as officers fanned out, armed and ready. Inside, Elizabeth jerked awake to the sound of barking dogs and urgent shouts. Thomas Garcia rushed into her room, gun in hand, cursing under his breath. Stay put, he snapped. Don't move. Elizabeth's pulse hammered. This might be her rescue, if she could just keep calm. She eyed Thomas carefully, noticing the panic in his eyes. Shouts of police, open up, resonated from outside. The standoff was brief but intense. Thomas tried to barricade the door, but police battered it down, weapons raised. A short exchange of yells followed, culminating in Thomas hurling his gun aside and dropping to his knees. Elizabeth, trembling, cried out, I'm here. Officers swept in, confirming the area was safe. Relief flooded Elizabeth as she recognized Detective Alvarez's face among them. Tears streamed uncontrollably. He's been holding me here. My husband, Richard, he arranged it, she gasped between sobs. Medics promptly escorted Elizabeth to an ambulance, checking her vitals. Outside, Victoria and Michael rushed to her side. Overwhelmed by emotion, they gently embraced her. We never stopped searching, Victoria whispered, tears shining in her eyes. Elizabeth clutched their hands, grateful beyond words. I knew you'd come, she managed, a sob catching in her throat. At last, she was free from captivity, though the aftershocks of Richard's treachery remained. With Elizabeth safe, the final confrontation now loomed. Richard Harrington had orchestrated his pregnant wife's disappearance to steal her fortune. The question was, could justice be served before he slipped away? News of Elizabeth's rescue spread swiftly. The media latched on to the sensational narrative. A wealthy, pregnant woman found captive in a remote cabin after vanishing under mysterious circumstances. Detective Alvarez, armed with Elizabeth's testimony, wasted no time obtaining an arrest warrant for Richard Harrington. Officers swooped down on the mansion in Greenwich, only to discover it empty. Richard, alerted by Thomas or his own channels, had vanished hours earlier. The staff, clueless and startled, reported that he'd grabbed a suitcase and roared off in a black SUV. Furious, Alvarez circulated a statewide APB. The hunt for Richard began in earnest. Meanwhile, in the hospital where Elizabeth was admitted for precautionary care, she recounted her ordeal. She explained that Richard had confronted her over the trust documents, and when she refused to sign them over, he drugged her. She woke up in the cabin with Thomas as her guard, presumably to be held until her prolonged absence allowed Richard to claim her inheritance. This brazen betrayal cemented the case for attempted kidnapping, fraud, and conspiracy. Juliana Beaumont also went missing. Investigators suspected Richard had fled with her or arranged a separate rendezvous to vanish abroad. Alvarez questioned the mistress's friends, but gleaned little. It seemed the pair had meticulously planned for a quick escape, possibly forging passports or stashing money offshore. Elizabeth, though relieved to be free, remained distraught. She faced the heartbreak that her husband, once the man she trusted, could stoop to such cruelty. The baby's due date loomed close, and the stress threatened her health. Yet, she found solace in the unwavering support of Victoria, Michael, and her medical team. Focus on healing, they urged. We'll help the police track him down. In a quiet moment, Elizabeth confided in Victoria, her voice trembling. I loved him so much once. I can't believe he was willing to lock me away, just so he could seize my money. I feel so naive. Victoria gently squeezed her hand. He manipulated you. No one blames you. You're brave for surviving. Now, let's ensure he can't hurt you again. As the national manhunt intensified, Elizabeth steeled herself for the final showdown. If Richard, fleeing justice, attempted one last desperate move, she vowed to stand firm. Her resilience, forged by captivity, would no longer allow him power over her life, her child, or her fortune. Close to midnight, inside a nearly deserted private airfield in upstate New York, a shadowy figure hopped out of a sleek black SUV. Richard Harrington, disguised in a dark cap and plain clothes, hustled toward a small charter plane. Juliana Beaumont trailed behind him, lips pinched with tension, clutching a designer carry-on. Their plan was to slip out of the country before the authorities closed in. However, Detective Alvarez had anticipated this move. Clues from Richard's phone logs and credit card alerts pointed to the airfield. Unbeknownst to the fleeing lovers, a SWAT team lay in wait, hidden behind hangars. As Richard approached the plane's steps, a commanding voice boomed. Freeze. Police. Floodlights blazed, illuminating the runway. Officers converged with weapons raised. Juliana schriekil, tropping herbeek. Richard spun, eyes wide, seconds from bolting. In that electrifying moment, Michael Donovan, who had accompanied the police, stepped forward. It's over, Harrington. You have nowhere to run. Richard's face contorted with rage and desperation. You meddling fool, he spat, glancing at Juliana, who was now cowering in tears. You promised you'd stand by me, he hissed at her. She choked back sobs. This is insane, Richard. I never wanted kidnapping, attempted murder, any of it. I'm done. Realizing betrayal from every angle, Richard's composure shattered. He made a wild dash behind the plane, possibly aiming for a second vehicle. Alvarez signaled her officers, who swiftly pursued. A short but intense chase ended with Richard pinned to the tarmac, arms wrenched behind him. He howled curses, but his defiance earned him only steel cuffs and a barrage of flashing cameras as media rushed forward. Juliana, hands trembling, surrendered. I only wanted to be with him, but not like this, she sobbed as an officer led her away on suspicion of conspiracy. The night air crackled with the end of a grand, malevolent scheme. Within hours, Elizabeth was notified of Richard's capture. Exhausted in her hospital room, she let out a shuddering breath of relief. The man who once swore to cherish her now faced charges of kidnapping, fraud, and attempted harm to both mother and unborn child. As dawn broke, an uneasy peace settled. The final confrontation had come and gone. Richard Harrington was firmly in custody, and Elizabeth, though forever scarred by the betrayal, was safe at last, free to reclaim her life and safeguard her impending motherhood. 2 months after Richard's dramatic arrest, Elizabeth sat in a rocking chair by a sunlit window in her new apartment, a place she chose for its serenity and modest charm worlds away from the Harrington estate's looming grandeur. She gently stroked her rounded belly, feeling the baby's strong kicks. The legal aftermath had been swift. Richard faced a barrage of charges and, confronted with overwhelming evidence, was convicted and sentenced to a lengthy prison term. Juliana, in exchange for her full testimony, received a lesser sentence but remained behind bars for conspiracy. Although Elizabeth could hardly rejoice at seeing others fall so low, she felt a profound sense of relief that justice had prevailed. Throughout the ordeal, Victoria Dawson had been her rock, while Michael Donovan offered unwavering support. Detective Alvarez, in a rare gesture, personally visited Elizabeth after the trial. "Your courage made this possible," Alvarez said gently. "I wish you and your baby all the best." Now, as Elizabeth readjusted to daily life, she refused to let bitterness define her. Instead, she harnessed her experience to advocate for victims of domestic abuse and financial coercion. She established a charitable foundation in her aunt's name, dedicating a portion of her inheritance to helping those in crisis, ensuring her pain could become a source of strength for others. One sunny afternoon, her body signaled that the baby was coming. Rushed to the hospital with Victoria by her side, she endured hours of labor, focusing on each breath. Finally, a healthy, crying baby boy was placed in her arms. Tears of triumph and healing spilled down her cheeks as she cradled her child, whom she named James Caldwell Harrington. A sweet new life, blessedly freed from the darkness that once threatened them both. In that moment, Elizabeth felt reborn. She gazed at her son, vowing he would grow up loved, protected, and far from the shadows of greed and betrayal. The life that had nearly been stolen from them now blossomed with renewed hope and the promise of a truly beautiful new beginning. Elizabeth Harrington's harrowing journey proves that even behind gilded mansion walls, betrayal and greed can corrode the most prized possessions: trust, love, and family. Her mysterious disappearance, orchestrated by a husband bent on stealing her fortune, nearly ended in tragedy. Yet, through her own courage, steadfast friends, and a determined investigator, Elizabeth not only survived but reclaimed her life and ushered in new hope with the birth of her child. If this gripping drama kept you on the edge of your seat, please show your support by liking this video and sharing it with fellow drama enthusiasts. And don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more captivating tales of love, betrayal, and redemption. Your engagement ensures we can continue bringing you stories that remind us that in the face of darkness, resilience can triumph, and a single act of courage can change everything.